And so we're going to talk a bit more about the World Economic Forum happening right now as well. Of course, Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, he's one of the main guy, well, the main guy pushing for this idea of the Great Reset. He's the guy where people joke around about saying, you know, eat the bugs and live in the pod, and you know, you'll have nothing and you'll be happy. Those kinds of things. Well, they're meeting right now on the idea of, well, their own idea of global governance, and it's happening alongside the World Health Organization, really getting powers that could constitute, to a good extent, global government powers, something that is not binding for countries, but, you know, they could, for example, hold countries to it and even punish them if they choose not to follow the directives. Now, let me show you some of this on World Economic Forum, which is underway right now. Now, they're discussing important items like censoring people, and they're holding journalists at gunpoint and creating the way to a new future built by establishment elites. Let me show you some of this. First of all, I'm going to show you a post by Breitbart. This is Klaus Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum, you know, applauding Davos elites, and he says the future is built by us. And let me show you this video, then we'll go into a bit more.
Finally, when I looked at the short video, I was thinking, should we have an atmosphere of optimism or pessimism? I think we should be joyful and grateful that we can meet again here in person. It's so important because confidence can only be built by personal contact. But let's also be clear, the future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room. We have the means to improve the states of the world, but two conditions are necessary. The first one is that we act all as stakeholders of larger communities, that we serve not our only self-interests, but we serve the community. That's what we call stakeholder responsibility. And second, that we collaborate.
A couple points on that. So first off, I mean, this is, again, Klaus Schwab. He had a book actually on COVID-19 where he's talking about COVID-19 as, you know, kind of the vehicle to achieve his vision of the Great Reset. And he's talking about this idea of stakeholder capitalism. And so there's a lot of loaded statements in what he said. Where he said stakeholders in the community. That's really you could say a suggestion of what he's talking about with stakeholder capitalism, because that's one of his big things. But first on that, you know, he's making a few points. One, that we need to build confidence, and confidence happens when you have face-to-face communication. These are the guys preventing the average people in most parts of the world from having face-to-face communication, because they have, again, social distancing, mask mandates, which many of them don't follow. You might notice none of them are wearing masks, hardly. And also, you know, making lockdown policies and so on. World Health Organization actually is making lockdowns a major part of its recommended policies, which we'll get into a bit later. Now, on the point of stakeholders and stakeholder capitalism, now this ties into one of the bigger ideas of kind of the future of what socialism is going to look like if they can move forward with it. Klaus Schwab is pushing this idea of stakeholder capitalism, where we're going to have a form of, well, socialism, i.e. communism, run through this stakeholder model where big businesses can basically become the gatekeepers of things like communications, business, and so on, and also work as the moderators of, say, communication, of, you know, working on censorship and other things, doing things that, well, private, you know, government could not do because it might violate the Constitution if it were to do it, for example, in the United States. Now, the idea of stakeholder capitalism ties into a lot of other things along those lines. When they talk about community policing, community schools, stakeholder capitalism, it all ties to the same basic model, which is basically where you have stakeholders within a system that can basically manage ideas, recommend policy, recommend things, and they are the ones that run the organizations. For example, community schools. I mean, when you hear community schools, my normal instinct would be maybe it's schools where the parents have a real say in things. No, that's not what they're talking about. Community schools and the community school model is where organizations like Planned Parenthood, like major corporations, like activist organizations have a direct role in the schools, and these become the stakeholders within the school system. When they talk about community policing, it's the same thing. And when they talk about stakeholder capitalism, this is a form of capitalism, i.e., business on a large scale, which is not subject to shareholders. Again, they're not interested in making higher profits. Well, they are still to an extent, but they're mostly held to these stakeholders. Stakeholders could be the employees, but mostly it's organizations like the ACLU, for example, just one example, and others that may have a real influence over the policies they want to push. And as many people like James Lindsay have noted, he did a book on American Marxism and what this model would mean. The idea they're pushing for is essentially where these nonprofit organizations, which then have a real governing role within the system, become almost like what you'd see in China with these Communist Party cells, where they can dictate policy. They can say, oh, this policy is inherently racist. And keep in mind that if you look at the idea of what racism is these days, racism is any kind of policy that leads to unequal outcomes, i.e. anything that's not socialism. And so unless it's a socialist policy, it's going to get called racist. They have changed even the dictionary definition of racism to mean this. When they talk about white nationalism, they don't mean like KKK or neo-Nazis. They mean white nationalism is in the idea of the modern capitalist world or free market world that they say that the white race is responsible for building, i.e. anything, again, that represents not a socialist model, it's going to get called racist. And so they can recommend things and say, oh, this is racist, that is racist, this is inherently discriminatory, when in reality it's just things that lead, as they call it, to unequal outcomes, i.e. anything that is not equity, which is one of the big buzzwords now for, well, socialism, right? Everybody equal under the sun other than the Communist Party elites. And anyways, he's also talking about the need for creating a future where everybody works together, i.e. global communism, united under one global elite. That's what they're talking about. Let me go a bit more into the World Economic Forum, because I want to finish a bit of this. Let me, and then we'll get Nick Corbishley on. I want to show you a video of what this also looks like, because while it sounds like this global community where we all work together, right? They're sending their henchmen with actual World Economic Forum police patches. And funny enough, you even have Reuters fact-checking this, saying there's no such thing as the World Economic Forum police. They have patches on their jackets that say World Economic Forum police. They're sending their stormtroopers, essentially, to go hold journalists at gunpoint and search them. Let me show you a video of this. Now, this is Jack Posobiec, who we're going to have on Crossroads. I texted him, I invited him on, so we are going to have him on in a future episode. We're just working out the details. But let me show this video. This is him in Switzerland trying to cover the World Economic Forum, and this is what they're doing to journalists.
Yeah, this is wild. Why am I not allowed to record?
Please don't.
Isn't this a public street?
It is, but actually I don't like it to be on a video.
I can take it off.
You have your documents on the phone. Take it off, please. Yeah. You want to take a picture of it? Yes.
We're doing everybody safe.
Drop it. Your iPhone. You can show me, and then I take a picture. Can you put your hand away?
I'm sorry?
Can you put your phone away?
Am I not allowed to film?
No.
Why not?
Not during the police conference.
Why is that?
It's not allowed here.
On the public street?
Yes.
Is that a law in Switzerland?
Here is not allowed. Please put it away.
Not familiar with that law.
Please put it away.
It seems like you just don't want me to film.
Sir, please put it away.
Okay.
Let me show you a picture real quick. This is the picture of the patches on their jackets. Because if you read a lot of the fact checks right now, they're saying there's no such thing as the World Economic Forum police. All right, don't trust your lying eyes. But let me show you their patch. Can you all read that? World Economic Forum police. Now, the caveat that organizations are using to try and say there's no such thing as the World Economic Forum police is apparently they give them, again, special assignments for events like the World Economic Forum, and they issue them patches like this. But it says on the patch, World Economic Forum police. So, don't trust your lying eyes, apparently. Now, look, there's some other video footage, but it's a long video, so I won't show you the whole thing. But, they're swiping their guns. They're pointing their guns at these journalists. They're carrying submachine guns, SMGs, right? Pointing them at journalists for doing nothing other than being there to cover the summit. While these are the same people criticizing gun ownership and saying anybody who owns guns is like, the devil, essentially. They're sending their stormtroopers out to go and harass journalists for just trying to do normal news coverage, even trying to make them delete files on their phones. The videos show this. They're telling them, delete your videos, delete your photos, don't record us. Like, you can't report on this major event where world leaders are trying to talk about they're working together for this new, stakeholder model of global elitism. Let me show you one other video here. Because while they're harassing journalists, while they're holding journalists at gunpoint, again with automatic submachine guns, they're having discussions like this. This is another video. This is the Australian E-Safety Commissioner, Julie Inman Grant, telling the World Economic Forum that we need a recalibration of free speech and other things. Let me show you this.
We are finding ourselves in a place where we have increasing polarization everywhere, and everything feels binary when it doesn't need to be. So I think we're going to have to think about a recalibration of a whole range of human rights that are playing out online, from freedom of speech to the freedom to, to be free from online violence, or the right of data protection to the right to child dignity. We are
now, folks, what is online violence, right? And how does recalibration of free speech tie into stopping online violence? Because they alter the definition of violence. Violence is no longer a physical act. Violence is now like offending somebody on the internet.